Feminine Genius Ministries teaches the Marquette method of natural family planning, which uses objective biomarkers to understand fertility and reproductive health. The protocols can be tailored to women at all stages of fertility, including postpartum. Your cycle is an important indicator of health and should be treated as such. So every instructor at Feminine Genius Ministries is a registered nurse and certified Marquette model instructor. With a variety of effective biomarkers to utilize, an instructor can work with you to personalize your approach to cycle tracking. Group sessions, private sessions, and a self-paced online course are available to provide multiple options to meet your individual scheduling needs and learning style. Also, Feminine Genius Ministries is giving our listeners a coupon code throughout the month of May for 10% off all classes. The code is Hormone Genius. To work with one of the Feminine Genius Ministries instructors, check out their website, femininegeniusministries.com. I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh. It's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Teresa and I are here to share with our listeners a little bit about inflammation. And I don't know about you, Teresa, but if I were to scroll and I was looking at episodes of podcasts that I like, and the title was called Inflammation, and maybe I was scrolling through like 5 or 10 years ago, I'd probably be like, boring. And then I'd move on. I'd be like, that sounds not like something I want to listen to. But hopefully our title will be very, capturing to our listeners, because this is a topic I've grown increasingly interested in. And partly, Teresa, and we'll kind of go back and forth, and the goal is to inform you all. But the reason why I think, Teresa, this is mattering more to me is because I am realizing that of course, I know I'm a healthy woman. I like to be active. I like to eat well, XYZ. But constantly, over and over again, I become so confused why I get sick all the time. It is driving me crazy, Teresa. And Teresa knows this because I message her all the time about it. If my kids get sick, I get sick. And it's not just I get sick, I get really sick. So if they have a little cold, I get a really bad cold. And so I'm kind of going through all these reasons of like, what am I doing that is not strengthening my body enough to fight some of these, bugs and infections and viruses and things. And I'd say that there's been a change over the last few years. Before that, I can't say that I struggled so badly. So it led me down this rabbit hole of thinking about my immune system. And of course, when we think about immune system, we think of inflammation. So that's the reason why I am interested in this topic. Ladies, if you are always kind of feeling a certain way, maybe you're just kind of always feeling tired, and no matter what you do, you can't quite snap out of it, or you're always feeling kind of like, blech, or you're always getting that bug, I want to talk about this. It does affect our hormones, obviously, but that's the reason why I kind of started digging more into this. It's also a topic that I go into with our hormone coaches. So I wanted to kind of spread the love and have a conversation with you today, Teresa, about this.
Well, I'm excited, Jamie, because I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed sometimes by this word inflammation, because it's kind of non-specific, right? When you talk about inflammation, you're like, oh, inflammation. Like I think of like something on your skin that's red, or, kind of in your body, you're like showing pain, heat, I'm thinking of these words that kind of describe like, what's the underlying thing going on? But when we think about what we're talking about today, it also has to do with kind of like overall in the body, what leads to some sort of disease eventually. And I think that's where a lot of medicine is going right now, to try to understand how inflammation leads to chronic disease. And again, it's really probably complicated. And at the same time, if you just kind of had to summarize it, our body is this unique balance of trying to stay alive and to keep the good and the bad in harmony with each other. So, in the body, there are these cells that we have, trillions of them, but not all of them are good at times. Mm-hmm. And the body is trying to make sure it gets rid of the bad cells, keep the good ones in a happy balance. And we need that. So there's this cell that they call the reactive oxygen species, right? And it's kind of this radical kind of thing that doesn't have stability. Mm-hmm. And our body makes it literally to fight abnormal cells and get rid of them so that we prevent disease. But yet, and this is true of so many things, if we have too much free radicals in our body, then we are in an imbalance and we can be causing damage to tissue and inflammation, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just this unique balance of our body's ability to stay alive and keep cell health and also rid the bad cells and get rid of them. So very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, super important. And again, I think even though inflammation seems like kind of boring, I think that by the end of this episode, there are going to be very practical steps that you ladies can all follow. And hopefully you can see a little bit of a difference, because Teresa, I can say I have noticed a difference in the last few weeks. So I'm excited to share a little bit about what I've done. And I really do feel like there's been a difference, because there's been a couple kids who've been sick and I have not gotten sick. And that is huge, Teresa, because again, because I message you every time. I'm like, oh,
well, yeah, okay. It's frustrating, Jamie, because I look at you and I think you do so much more healthy things than I feel like I do sometimes. And I've always been like, I don't ever get sick. And I really don't, so I sometimes just think, oh, I've just been gifted with a happy immune system. I'm just lucky. Right. So if you're out there and you think, well, I already eat clean, I already do all the things, and I am always the one who's getting the virus and getting sick, I think that's what Jamie is. She's telling us, like, I'm doing all the things, but I still feel like I'm sick. Why? So what can you do for that?
Yeah, man. Gosh, it just fires me up. Okay, so we're going to talk about what inflammation is. And we talked a little bit about it, but we'll take a deeper dive. I really want to talk about leaky gut. We've talked about leaky gut before, but that's kind of really where we're going to drive a lot of this concept of inflammation from, is really about the health and state of our gut, which again is part of the story that I'm navigating in my own health. And then also the role of inflammation in regards to our hormones. And then we'll tie up again with some lifestyle factors, dietary influences, and some action steps. So just for those of you who are wondering what you're getting into, that's really what we're going to be doing. But again, like Teresa said, there's inflammation, and it's kind of this vague term. But typically, again, when we think of inflammation, we think of something that causes us pain. I hit my elbow, or I have a headache, or there's some sort of pain or discomfort, or I got a cut on my arm. Like, inflammation is good for the body. Because again, it's a defense mechanism against injury or infection, and we need a healthy inflammatory response. But often we don't have healthy inflammatory responses. Sometimes the inflammation goes a little overboard, causing a cascade of issues in other ways. So, it's important to navigate what may be the cause of inflammation. So let's kind of start, Teresa, with leaky gut. Leaky gut is important. You've all heard of leaky gut before, probably, but if not, so our intestines are it's a one cell intestinal lining that keeps the good and the bad in our gut so that it can be exported outside of our body. And then it keeps it in our gut or in intestines, and it doesn't seep into our bloodstream. Our bloodstream is collecting, of course, the good nutrition and the vitamins, but the toxins, the heavy metals, the pesticides, the whole food particles, even that maybe were not digested down enough, for instance, or weren't quite finished with the digestion, these whole food particles can even seep into our bloodstream. And what happens is our body, anytime something is where it shouldn't be in our body, so anytime a toxin or pesticide or anything, let's say little particles, enter into our bloodstream that's not meant to be there, an inflammatory response takes place. Our body says, hold up, like this is not meant to be in the bloodstream, hold up. So there is an inflammatory response. And sometimes if the state of our gut is so stretched out, so leaky gut means like that one cell barrier, they're stretched out. So that's how these food particles can pass from the intestines into the bloodstream. I like to think of a pair of mesh shorts, like basketball. If you're just to stretch mesh shorts, you'd see that the holes are like visible enough for things to pass through. So that's how I envision that. So imagine having this leaky gut, eating the foods you're eating, let's say, and because you have this leaky gut, food particles and all these other things could be entering into the bloodstream constantly. So it's maybe just not like once in a while. If the state of our gut is inflamed or leaky or weak, then this is going to be a constant source of inflammation. That's often a cause of why we have autoimmune diseases. It's because it's an issue that doesn't, if it's not resolved, it will continue, and our body then responds to what should not be in our bloodstream. And so for me, I've been thinking, and for you ladies listening, what may be causing inflammation in your body? Do you have like headaches and migraines? Do you have really painful bleeding in periods? Do you get sick all the time? Is there discomfort in your joints? Do you have thyroid issues, endometriosis, which are autoimmune conditions? If so, I urge you to think about the gut. And if your gut is not in, the strongest state that it could be in, there could be reason to believe that your gut needs some repair. And that's kind of where I started digging in first, Teresa.
Yeah, so that makes me think of, these food sensitivity panels that people can do. And I sometimes run them because the goal of that, from at least a food standpoint, is to try to see what is inflaming the gut lining and causing that intestinal permeability. But I think a lot of people don't understand, you might be someone who's eating, again, pretty darn healthy, and your gut still is behaving pretty bad. Like maybe you just eat kind of paleo, but your gut is upset still. And I think that's what's so hard about this is every person's unique, as always, and we're not sure what is the offending thing. So sometimes those food sensitivity panels, I call them a roadmap. It doesn't mean you're allergic to those foods. It just means in this moment in time, it is possible that those foods are seeping through your intestinal lining, and that's something that we want to seal. And so it can be a way, and they call these like elimination diets, or, just what you're doing is you're trying to strategize, kind of like reducing the amount of things that the gut could be offended by for a period of time, maybe 3 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, maybe a couple months, and then letting it seal. I mean, it makes sense. And so it doesn't mean when people have to figure out what things are good or bad in their gut that they're never going to eat those things again. It's just a healing and a repair process that has to occur. And again, I think food sensitivity panels have their place. I don't think they're perfect by any means, but I do think they at least can give somebody a starting place for understanding what is going on in the gut.
Totally. And honestly, I did do a food sensitivity panel, and dairy was right up there. And, I thought, the food sensitivity things, like you're saying, it's a roadmap, but it's not the end all be all. And so really that was my justification for not giving up dairy for for the months in which I had this report. Because of course there are other things that were flagged as things that might be a mild sensitivity, a moderate, and a more serious sensitivity. And honestly, my most sensitive thing was brewer's yeast, which is interesting. And then honestly, the dairy wasn't that high. And I just kind of gave myself reason to still do dairy. But I've just been getting so frustrated. I thought, I'm just going to stop dairy. I'm just going to stop it, see what happens. I've not had dairy for a month, and I've been fine. I have been fine. I'm like, what is happening? It's crazy, because that's what happens to other people when they give up dairy. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I'm fine. No, dairy, Teresa. Literally, I do not feel nearly as tired. Even yesterday, when was it? 2 days ago. So I'm in my post-ovulation phase. So I actually just got my period yesterday. Okay, so a few days ago, normally I'd be feeling really garbage. Like I'm kind of like mad at everyone, kind of PMSy. I even ran out of progesterone, so I need more of that. So I wasn't even taking it the last few days of my cycle. And I told my husband, I'm like, we need to go on a date. I have so much energy and I want a margarita with you. I actually wanted a margarita, but also I wanted to like eat other things of my life are feeling better just with this one thing. Now, I don't want to oversell it. Maybe it's just a weird coincidence and maybe it's something else, or maybe it's a combination of things. But I think it's important to think what might be the one thing where if I eliminate it, so you mentioned elimination diet, Teresa. If I eliminate it for 2 to 4 weeks, how does that make me feel? That's all you got to do. I told myself I'm going to give it 2 weeks, and I did. And I thought, like, that's not hard right in this moment. I thought it'd be harder. Gave it 4 weeks. I'm like, I feel so much better.
Wow. That's great.
Oh,
it makes me think of my son. And from the time he was little, we kind of joke that he's got chicken skin. And it's chicken skin is just, oh my gosh, pilaris keratosis is the name for it. It's like these little tiny bumps on the backs of your arms and on your thighs sometimes. It's a kind of a common dermatological condition. But I've thought, I'm like, I bet it's a dairy intolerance, you know? And lately he's now 11. He's been noticing himself that when he eats dairy, he doesn't feel well. And so I know it's hard because you don't want kids to, again, necessarily like always get rid of all foods, but we're just having this conversation about, Fulton, I think, you might have a dairy intolerance. So on his own, I'm just letting him trying to decide, should we get rid of it and see how you do? And I'm just curious if those little bumps will get better, because I've seen that happen in myself when I've just gone on more of a super clean keto diet. Those bumps on the back of the arm go away.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And something else too, I'll share. So dairy is one. And of course, we know gluten is another inflammatory food, often for many people. But even things I've just been kind of obsessed with. Have you heard of Bobby Parish?
Yeah.
Bobby Parish. Okay. So I follow him on YouTube, and he's all about like an anti-inflammatory diet, basically. So he goes to the grocery store and he pulls out all these foods and helps you read the labels and helps you understand, like, oh, this food, you'd think ketchup would be fine, but truly there's sucralose, or not sucralose, there's a bunch of sugar and, high fructose corn syrup, and all those are inflammatory. And while I know those things, obviously, because I'm on this mission, I've become very strict about it for this month, So I've known that, but I've just been far more mindful about anything and everything, like what's causing inflammation. So not only have I gotten rid of dairy, but I've limited the processed foods. I'm not eating sugar besides the margarita I had with my husband a couple days ago. But even like these stupid oil, I get so mad at our American diet because there's so many hidden, stupid, inflammatory oils found everywhere, even in supplements like vegetable oil, that is within the vitamin capsule, or when we're buying dressings at the grocery store, the canola oil, the vegetable oil, soybean oil, cottonseed oil, peanut oil, blah, butter alternatives like margarine and things like those oils are inflammatory. And so again, I've been not doing that. Also, I've been trying to keep with more, the real food things. So if I'm going to have foods, I'm going to keep it to 5 ingredients or less. The fruits and vegetables, eating more fish and meat and that sort of thing. So I feel like that's been helping. And something I'm just more a fan of lately, and I actually hate, like, I don't want to say hate because that's a strong word, but diet names. Like, I don't like calling things, the Mediterranean diet, keto, paleo, Atkins, anything else, although I know that's an easy way to describe the kind of food we're eating here. But just personally, with the history of an eating disorder, just in college, I always really try not to restrict myself. So that's another thing too. I'll say here before, Teresa, I want to hear your thoughts, but something about knowing that you want to adjust the way you eat, but also knowing that you have a personality that could go overboard with it, I've had to be very careful about, yes, eliminating foods, but not being too restrictive where I go into a spiral which is not healthy. So I kind of want to talk about that too, because that, I would say, has been maybe a reason I haven't done anything like this so, intently, for fear of kind of spiraling into a place I don't want to go, of control and mastery and those sorts of things.
Couple of things I want to circle back on. I just actually listened to a whole podcast on the seed oils thing. I didn't really quite, and it goes back to what I said, I guess. So you just understand why these are inflammatory is because they tend to release more reactive oxygen species, which is why the free radicals. So that has to do with that oxidation process, which can be inflammatory to the body. So that's what those seed oils, because people wonder, well, why are those oils supposedly bad? Right. And you can look this podcast that I listened to. It's called the Root Cause podcast. Very good podcast. I recommend it. And she was on just recently, but she calls them the Hateful Eight oils. And again, I say this, and I don't know enough to really speak fluently on it, but you mentioned the canola, the corn, cottonseed, sunflower, safflower oil, even grapeseed oil is considered. So, and you would think grapeseed oil would be like really healthy, but again, it just has to deal with their ability to be more in the body, create these free radicals. So that's interesting. The other thing that I think, Jamie, when you said it, it kind of spoke to me is that, you're angry at the American diet. And I am too, because it feels unjust that we have to be so in tune with the labels, and it's just frustrating, right? It's like, why can't we just go to the grocery store and pick out food and go home and eat, And I get angry about it. I really do, because you have some people in the nutrition world, and they're like, nobody should ever give up anything. People should just eat a well-balanced diet and all this kind of stuff. And that's true. But then you're like, but then there's all this crap and regular foods all the time. And it just makes me angry. So I just wanted to talk about that, because I was talking to my daughter last night, and she's had gut issues for most of her life. And she was talking, I was like, we're talking about doing the gluten-free thing and maybe just giving it the 2 to 4 weeks, you see how her gut feels. But she said, some people make it look so easy, Mom. And I was like, it's true. It seems like sometimes like it should be so easy. And I know you just have to get into it, like you said, because at the time you want to do it, it just seems overwhelming. You're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to give up? Anyway, so I just get it. I just get it that this is not easy.
Right. And I think it also takes us to a point. For me, I'll just use me as an example, but I have not been feeling well for a while. In my mind, I train women to be hormone coaches. I know, in my head, I know I can't say the best way to eat because it's different for everybody, but I know the adjustments I could have been making before. I, in my head, just thought, well, I'm a healthy enough woman where the reason I'm getting sick so much can't be just because of what I'm eating. And honestly, it hasn't, also because I need surgery on my nose. So that's a whole other story. But even still, I have not had surgery on my nose yet because I have obstructions, and I've still been feeling so much better. So praise God for that. But I think it comes to a point where you're just so frustrated. I just got so fed up, where I think that's really the answer to me not spiraling, let's just say, down a way I don't want to go. Or even for your daughter, who isn't feeling well. Maybe she's not feeling well. She's had gut issues, but maybe it hasn't led her to a point yet where she would just do anything. Because I really would. I'm getting so mad.
Right.
So I think. And I've been frustrated before, and I could have done this before. I've always had the question of, what if I give up dairy? And again, this is only a theory because it's just been a month. But sometimes I just think it takes you to a point where you're like, I'm going to do that because I can't stand the alternative.
Right. Yeah. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
But Jamie, what else for inflammation?
Yeah.
Things can we talk about?
Yeah. So I think it's important to know what things cause inflammation. So what we're talking about is and also a lot of the processed foods are terrible for us. Alcohol causes inflammation. Sugars cause inflammation. A lot of red fatty meats cause inflammation. So it's important to know what causes inflammation, But what's as equally, if not more important, is to know what things we can consume in our diet that helps our inflammatory responses. So omegas, so including, those omega-3 fatty acids in our diet. Of course, we know that's found in fish, salmon, sardines. Who likes sardines? I do not. Avocados, avocado oils, those sorts of things. Again, if you're looking for a diet to follow, but again, I don't really love the word diet, but Mediterranean diet is what I found far and above with research with inflammatory markers. Hands down, it's the best diet for that goal, the Mediterranean. So I've been trying really hard to do that. So again, green leafy vegetables like spinach and kale, which are full of antioxidants and polyphenols, like you're saying, the free radicals. So it helps to eliminate those free radicals. And also I like to, I'll say this too before, because I know you want to say something. I can tell when I look at you, Teresa, I can tell. But something else that I love about the Mediterranean people, maybe what I've just been learning more, is just their life around food in a sense. Like they go on walks and they spend time with their family, and it's relaxing and it's something that you enjoy. And so even coming down to just like how we eat our food, like, am I eating food when I'm stressed out? Am I eating food quickly? Do I chew meat and nuts at least 40 times in my mouth, which is the optimal time to chew nuts and meat to fully, start that digestive process? Well, I bet the Mediterraneans do, because they're relaxed. They're not in a hurry. So even more than the foods they eat, I feel like it's maybe more their lifestyle that I really love.
Yeah, no, and that's actually what they've found in looking at the blue zones, and looking at the people who live the longest. It wasn't like they could say all the people in the different areas of the blue zones, because they were all over the world, were all eating the same, but there were some similar things, and they were all very heavily plant-based. And if there was any, again, nutritional profile they could say fit that, it would be a Mediterranean lifestyle. But they focused on kind of that, the lifestyle, the way the environment was set up. And now there's people that go around to try to create blue zone kind of like cities. And the way they set up the environment is so that people can walk everywhere, that they have community, so relationship and social support. And the walking is huge, the ability to have physical movement and activity. And it also, the spiritual aspect was brought up in the blue zones too. And that people it doesn't have to be like a religion per se, but they needed some connection with a higher kind of like a transcendental, or however you want to say it, life. Some spiritual aspect was incredibly important. And napping to those things too in the blue zone. So that's something fun to kind of look at, is if you want to kind of dive into just seeing what the blue zones, and again, these particular places. What was sad to hear about the blue zones is that Okinawa, Japan is one of them. And, they looked very heavily at that place because of the length of life. Again, this is places where people live the longest. Like they call them the type of place you could get to 100 or be a centenarian. But they, in the last 20 years, have lost that status. Why, Jamie?
American diet.
The American diet.
Yeah.
It's like so sad. Literally, standard American diet. So sad that a blue zone in 20 years. I mean, we're talking probably centuries of time that this place existed with these healthy lifestyles. And now it's devastated in 20 years because of just the change in nutritional profile. So that's a really good point about inflammation right there. And probably the greatest tool that we can, put to use is this idea that the more plants that have antioxidants that neutralize free radicals, again, this is the balance of keeping healthy cells and ridding out unhealthy cells in the body, which is a constant process. But without antioxidants, the body cannot neutralize inflammation in a sense.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I have a study up here that I want to share because, again, some people might be thinking, well, maybe this is more just, great advice, but how could you ever really measure, how the Mediterranean diet, for example, could be helpful for inflammation? But there's an inflammatory or an inflammation assessment or lab profile where they can measure all these like reactive proteins. And they found with the Mediterranean diet that it was the most pronounced effect on the anti-inflammatory potential. So they tested, I don't even know how to say the biomarkers, but all these like inflammatory biomarkers, and they tested the Mediterranean diet against like the vegetarian diet and the vegan diet. And I don't know what the DASH diet is, but the DASH diet. And they found that with the vegan, the vegetarian, and DASH, that there was no pronounced effects of that, which is interesting because you think about vegetarian, vegan being mostly plant-based. So it's just really that balance, I would say, those fish, the oils, the nuts and seeds and things. So I just thought that was interesting. So if you're wondering what are your biomarkers of inflammation, you can actually get those measured. And I don't know, Teresa, I'm not a pro in that, knowing exactly what those are called or giving an overview of that specifically, but what would be a good starting point for our listeners if they wanted to check?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them, but one that insurance more likely covers would be the high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is a general inflammatory marker. It can be considered specific to cardiac disease, but you can use it as a generally overview of someone's inflammation. And that's one that's been very much well studied. And you want a level that's as close to 0 as possible, but the range goes up to 3. And so the more high that is, the more chance that you have some inflammation. It doesn't mean we know exactly where that's coming from. But I sometimes use homocysteine as a marker of inflammation because that has something to do with methylation and the detoxification processes that our bodies go through. And that's really important to understand how our body is, again, in this cellular balance. So homocysteine is one. There's a bunch of other ones that, again, insurances don't cover, but somebody could get like cytokines, interleukin factor, myeloperoxidase. There's like GIF. There's like all these different ones that kind of can show if you're toxic in your body. But like I said, that would take a whole episode to go through all those. But I would say the HSCRP is just like one your doctor would maybe understand, because I just like an inflammation check. And could you run an HSCRP?
Right.
And as Jamie, maybe as we close this up, maybe if there was some, I don't know, additional kind of like supplementation of antioxidants, what could we say are the top that you like, Jamie?
Yeah. I love turmeric, obviously. I don't know if that's obvious, but I love turmeric. It's a spice. And it has it has been proven to reduce those inflammatory markers in your body. So you can include it in your cooking. You can get a golden milk latte at your coffee shop, which is literally turmeric with steamed milk and espresso. And then I like to I take an encapsulated form of turmeric with the turmeric like the turmeric spice with the turmeric oil, and it's more bioavailable with more diverse effects. So that's what I do every single day. So I love that. Also, NAC is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Or I've just been learning more about it. I cannot pronounce what it is. such and what.
It's N-acetylcysteine. It's actually not that hard of a one.
Say it again.
N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine. Yeah.
I said such and yeah, it's not even close for what I was thinking. So I really like NAC because NAC has also been known to be an amazing antioxidant to help also decrease the inflammation. Also, it's been known to really help our liver. So people who have damage to the liver because of, overconsuming Tylenol, it's been known to help with our liver as well. So that's one that I like a lot. Also, again, we need our omegas. So always taking an omega-3 fatty acid supplement is going to be key. And I would say that would probably be the first place I'd start if you're just beginning to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. Other tips, and I do want to say, if you struggle again with painful periods, and let's say you do have endometriosis or you're not sure, always think about how can we reduce inflammation. There's already inflammation taking place during our period. I wanted to mention that. Also, if you have a thyroid condition, be thinking about how can I reduce inflammation. There's already inflammation in our body. So what can we do to help bring that down. Think about what foods might be causing issue. So think about what foods might be causing issue. So these are your action steps, ladies. Think about what foods may be causing issue. Do an elimination process. So maybe pick dairy, pick gluten, pick soy, pick whatever food you may want to begin with. And you can maybe even eliminate a number of foods or items for 2 to 4 weeks, and then one by one start adding them back. Don't add them back at the same time because you will never know which is the culprit. So that is step 1. Step 2, check your labels. Make sure you're not getting a ton of these dumb seed oils. Again, don't go crazy over it if you're kind of like me, where you could get really over into it. But there are like really great, grocery stores, that natural grocers and Whole Foods and things, where it's going to be easier to find the dressings and foods that are tasty and easy to find. Make sure that you're including leafy greens into your diet, foods with antioxidants and phytonutrients, regular activity, getting naps. And then also green tea is super, super helpful. So at the end of every night, maybe you end the night with just drinking some green tea. Put a little bit of ginger in your green tea if you want. And last but not least, the most important thing to decrease inflammation is to just take a breath. When we are stressed, when we are overworked, when we feel overburdened, it does cause inflammation, because when we're stressed, it increases our cortisol. Cortisol keeps us alive. Inflammation even is meant to keep us alive, like you were talking about, Teresa. But if we have too much, it can really cause issue. So eat when you're calm, journal, do deep breathing, just like those who live in the Mediterranean, and then let that kind of be your anchor. Let that be your starting point if these other things are a little overwhelming for you. So, Teresa, with that, thanks for talking about inflammation today. Hopefully we made it interesting for our listeners, and I pray that you guys all have a starting point to decrease inflammation in your body.
Thanks, Jamie. That was great.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.